name is Alessandra, and I'll be explaining how our game works. So when you first open the app, it'll prompt you to select a player number. So one person will select player 1 and the other will select player 2. You'll then click Start Game, and it'll pull up the gameplay. So then player 1 will roll, and they will get a score. You can click End Turn, which updates the ThinkSpeak channel. As you can see, it just updated it right there. Once the ThinkSpeak updates player 2, we'll click Ready, which updates player 1's score right here. They can then click Roll, and they'll have a score. They can click End Turn, which sends their score over here to field 2 of the ThinkSpeak. Player 1 can then click Done, which updates player 2's score right here. Then either player can click End Game, and it will show the winner right here. So that is how the game works. And looking at the code, I did the ThinkSpeak part. So when the End Turn buttons are pushed, the code will send the player score into the ThinkSpeak channel right here for player 1 and right here for player 2. And when the Done and Ready buttons are pushed, it will read that data and put it here. So you can see when the Ready button is pushed, it reads that data. So that is how the app works. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maya, and I mostly worked on the object-oriented part of the code. So I created a class for the players, and I made properties for each player to keep track of stuff like the player name and like the player score and stuff like that. And I made a method to create the object, and we didn't add additional methods to calculate score and stuff like that. We made separate functions for that, which are gone over later. In the main code, I created each player object as a property in the app so that they can be accessed anywhere in the app. And then I created a roles variable to keep track of the roles for each turn for the players. And then I created arrays to keep track of the scores during throughout the game for each player. And then for calculating the score, when roll buttons and roll again buttons are pushed for both player 1 and player 2, we basically went through a sequence of events, which are like rolling the dice and then calculating the image or calculating the score through like the score update and the update player scores. And then the objects for player 1 and player 2. This is player 1's button, but the things like the properties of each object are used to calculate the score of each player based on the roll. So I made the update player score, which basically takes into account if a snake eye or snake eyes are rolled and calculates the score accordingly, and then reset score, which resets the score if a snake eye or snake eyes is rolled. And then the sequence of like calculating the player score is it's the same sequence is there for the roll and roll again buttons for both player 1 and player 2 throughout the main gameplay code. And the properties are changed for each player object accordingly. And then I also used the properties of each object to calculate which player wins and to keep track of the player name and store that player name of the winner in a global variable for the winner of the game. This code it's seen throughout, including, like, depending on, there are multiple ways the game can end. So it's in several types throughout the code. And then in the ending screen, the winner name is imported and then displayed in the winner edit field. And then the names of the players can also be changed, and they're stored. The player name property of each player object is updated depending on if the player name is changed, and then it's updated with that name.
So I coded a lot of the functions associated with gameplay. This first function, dice roll, uses a random number generator to generate two numbers between 1 and 6 that represent the roll of 2 dice. It outputs these 2 numbers into an array roll score. Score update takes the array roll score, assigns one value to dice 1 and the other value to dice 2, and then processes those scores. So it checks dice 1 and dice 2 for the values of 1. If there's 1 1, then that's a snake eye. If there's 2 1s, that's snake eyes. And then based on that, it'll reset scores. And if neither of those things are true, neither dice is equal to 1, then it outputs dice roll score, which is just the sum of the 2 dice numbers. And it sets game score equal to 1 to let you know that no snake eyes have been rolled. And then it outputs whether or not snake eyes and snake eye are true, whether or not the game score function should be activated, and it outputs the dice roll score. So get player 1 score, there's 2 of these functions actually. One of them is player 1 score, one is player 2 score. They both do the same thing, but all they do is format the player scores correctly using player 1 scores, which is an array of all of the rolls of player 1, and player round number, which is a value that is calculated in the gameplay function, like all of our code. And so it makes an array of the round numbers and an array of the scores, and then formats them so they can be outputted in a data table. Show dice image, we have one function. It works for both dice. Basically, these are the faces of dice 1 and dice 2, and this is the value of the die. So based on whatever dice value, for instance, if it's 1, then all the dice faces images are set equal to 0, except for face 1. So it does that for all 6 faces. And this function is activated twice, one for dice 1, one for dice 2. They both do the same thing. Finally, in gameplay public export, which is our main file, I did a couple of things. The first is I coded the UI data table so that it would display data. That's this function here. And then I also counted round numbers. So that is somewhere down here, maybe. And so every time snake eyes is rolled for player 2, or every time player 2 clicks the end round button, the round number increases by 1, it starts at 0. And if the round number is equal to 5, it basically does the end game processes. And so there are a couple different places in the code that this function or this if statement is pasted, but it does the same thing in all those places. And that's it.
Hi, I'm Nabia, and I was in charge of the audio-visual components for the dice game, in addition to the composition and upload of the YouTube video. So I designed and edited the game, the layout, and added the animation and sounds.
Look here at the gameplay, you see a dice animation that indicates which player's turn it is. And if we roll a snake eyes, a snake animation alongside the label, this label pops up, and you just exit out of it. The animation's on the rules page, and the animation's up the end screen.
So for some examples on the audio added to the game, there is a dice roll clip when roll and roll again is hit, for example. And when snake eyes is rolled, a snake hissing sound effect is played. And when you press end turn, in addition to pressing end game.
I added the animations and images by placing them where we desired in the app design of MATLAB, and then creating a startup function as seen here, and using set functions to turn the images visibility on or off. So, for example, if snake eyes was rolled by a player, the snake eyes animation is turned on and visible, and in addition to an audio command that plays the snake hiss. I added audio to sound when certain buttons were pressed and if snake eyes were rolled. Thank you for watching.